Hi everyone, welcome to chapter 3. In this video, I'm going to start going over section 3.1 and 3.2. First, let me begin with some of the student learning outcomes that are related to this chapter. The first is recognize the difference between formal and informal fallacies. Second is to identify the fallacies of relevance. And third, explain the nature of fallacies of relevance. Before I get into section 3.1 and 3.2, let me give you an overview of the whole chapter. There are 22 informal fallacies overall. They are divided into different sections. So we have first the fallacies of irrelevance, second, the fallacies here of weak induction. There are 6 of these. Then there's the fallacies of presumption. There are 4 of these. The fallacies of ambiguity. There are 2 of these. And then the fallacies of illicit transfers. And there are 2 of these. So in total, there are 22 fallacies. In section 3.1 and 3.2, we're going to be going over the fallacies in general and then the fallacies of relevance. So let's talk about fallacies in general. What are fallacies? So fallacies are basically bad arguments that appear to be good. There's something persuasive about them, but ultimately an argument is supposed to provide evidence for a conclusion. And while they may have some kind of persuasive aspect to it, they are not logically or rationally good arguments. They can be either a product of an honest mistake that an arguer makes, or they could be intentionally a strategy to persuade people to believe something. The first thing we need to know is the difference between formal and informal fallacies. And this is very important because formal fallacies have to do with formal arguments or deductive arguments. So you remember the difference between formal and informal logic is the same as the difference between deductive and inductive logic. So formal fallacies are fallacies that occur with deductive arguments. Basically, any argument that is deductively invalid is a fallacious formal argument. So for instance, all A are B, all C are B, therefore all A are C. This is a formal fallacy because there is something, it's an invalid argument, it's a deductive argument, but there's something wrong with the structure or the form of the argument, and therefore we call it a formal fallacy. In this chapter, we're going to be talking only about informal fallacies, okay? Now, informal fallacies are the inductive arguments, and they are bad inductive arguments. But inductive arguments, to determine whether it's a fallacy or not, we need to look at the content of the argument. So here's an example. The Brooklyn Bridge is made of atoms. Atoms are invisible, therefore the Brooklyn Bridge is invisible. Well, we know that this is not true, but this sounds like a good argument. This is a fallacy. And we will talk about this fallacy later on in the 3rd week. It's a fallacy of composition. So this is an example of an informal fallacy. Now, in the next lecture, I will start getting into the informal fallacies of irrelevance.